Hi, welcome to the 6th edition of Blue Soccer. Again, John, Dave, and myself. Going to look back over Leinster's disappointing results last weekend, all the other European action, of course. Have a look at the Lions selections and our game against Connacht in the Rainbow Cup. So, boys, very disappointing results, 32-23 over in La Rochelle. Still haven't really had to wear a Hawaiian shirt today just to try and cheer myself up.
I had to wear a Kiwi shirt.
Over it.
That's how bad I am. I wore this shirt actually because I woke up this morning and you know the way you get this day 13 years ago? And this day 13 years ago I was wearing this t-shirt, and when I opened my drawer it was the first thing in my drawer. Went,
it still hasn't been washed.
It still hasn't been washed. 13 years. I'm doing well. Yeah, the game was a massive disappointment. I was so hoping to be in our our 5-star final against Toulouse. After seeing the results on the Saturday, I just really, and I think we all predicted a Leinster win last week, and we were all feeling fairly confident, whatever day that was, Wednesday or Thursday last week. And
I think Paddy Power have decided to sponsor this show now because of our tips.
We made them before.
Yeah. Our viewer dropped a monkey on it, and Paddy Power's profits went through the roof.
Excellent. Yeah, we were.
Knowing our luck, we'd probably hook up with Ivan Yates's crowd.
Yeah, it was very disappointing. Better team won on the day, it has to be said.
Yeah.
Like, they looked better for most of the game. We weren't too bad in the first half, but there was some good performances in our team. Keller was good. Jack Conan, probably see he was elected for the Lions today. We'll probably get onto that as well. But there were Henshaw as usual, pretty good. But they were just a better team on the day. They were more up for it. They were more, even when they had a man. They were better prepared. When they had a man sent off, they managed that a lot better than we did. You wouldn't. What was it? 7-6. We lost the yellow card by a point, as far as I remember.
We won it by which now, ours or theirs?
Sorry, we won it by a point there. Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, we won their yellow card by a point, which is a narrow enough margin. Now, yellow cards don't make as much difference these days, it seems to me, as they used to. But having said that, you would have expected us to be able to pull clear. Now, they found it difficult to get across our try line for a long, long time, but they kept it taken over with the point. I hate to refer to Raj on this, but it's kind of like what he would have done, keeping the scoreboard taken over. Fair play to them. They did, you can have no complaints whatsoever about referees. Or in fact, I thought in the first half again, I thought the referee, if anything, was favouring us. We seemed to get a rub of the green a little bit early on. Now, didn't continue for the game or anything, but fair play to them. Better team on the day, and must do better in the column under Leinster.
But John, you mentioned there they kept the scoreboard ticking over. We kept giving them penalties in kickable areas, not too dissimilar to what Exeter did to us. We played into their hands. Now, whether that was whether that was us making dumb mistakes, like for example James Lowe, not rolling away, keeping his foot on the ball, regardless of how much he protests his innocence, that's what the referee saw. Or you have players like James Ryan taking the ball into contact and no one there to help him clean out the ball quickly enough, and he gets turned over and penalised under our posts.
That's actually an example I was going to use because obviously wasn't the turning point. It was a turning point because there were a lot of areas we lost in, and this wasn't the sole one. But when we lost Ruddock, we lost an awful lot of our power at the breakdown. And that was one of the first breakdowns after that. He went, as you say, Ryan picked and went, and he had Toner with him to clear out. And God bless Toner, but he's not going to get down that low. And once Ruddock went off, we had nothing at the breakdown. I thought I said it to you at the time. I thought it was a mistake bringing on Ryan Baird, not because Ryan Baird isn't a good player, he is, but because that's not his game. He's not.
Yeah.
He's not, that classical blindside flanker who's going to clear out a ruck. And we got destroyed at the breakdown. I mean, we got destroyed against Munster at the breakdown, but there was reasons for that. We got destroyed again this week. That's 2 weeks in a row, for different reasons and with different selections. But we did get absolutely monstered at the breakdown. With the result that, I mean, we were unable to stop them doing anything they wanted to do at the breakdown when they had the ball, because we weren't able to slow them down, not particularly. They destroyed us on turnovers. We weren't able to slow them down. We ended up having to soak tackles, with the result that their big guys were running at us with momentum instead of having to take the ball standing or even stepping back. I mean, for all the talk about Will Skelton and what's his face, the prop,
Antonio.
Yeah, I was going to say the guy with the Italian name, Unai Antonio. They're big guys and they're powerful guys, but they're not explosive. Not like, say, Billy Vunipola is. Billy Vunipola is a very explosive guy. You could get to him before he starts, and he's still going to burst you. Those guys need a bit of going to get moving, and we weren't able to put them on the back foot at all. They were able to trundle up and down in their lanes. We'd never stressed them. We never stressed their fitness. We never stressed their tactics. It was, in the end, they were comfortable enough.
Yeah, that's a big point, and I think we said it last week. We were supposed to be moving them around and keeping the game flowing. We did neither. We gave them plenty of opportunity to rest. And like you said about Udi Antonio and Will Skelton, they can kill you by lying up against you, because they're so bloody heavy.
But like our halfbacks just didn't play clever rugby. The 9 continually kicked away possession that made no difference. It was just kicking it and hoping it. And then I thought, Ross Byrne stood very deep. And when he did stand deep, he either took the ball out, he just trundled the ball on, or we never saw him kick. He's his best attribute as a rugby player is his kicking, the accuracy of his. We didn't try, for example, the sun was in the eyes of their winger. He turned his back on one kickoff. That should have been exploited continually during the game. When we were defending that corner, they kicked it into our, and Larmer dealt with it pretty well, and Conan dealt with it, not just from kickoffs, from them making crossfield kicks into that corner. We didn't try it once. We kicked the crossfield once for James Lowe on penalty advantage, and he knocked it on. We should have been trying to do that a little bit more frequently. They were rushing up in defense. We never once chipped over the top or kicked it through. We ran up blind alleys, and as Dave said, Ruddock going off at 26 minutes crippled us. I just went through all of the scores and the penalties. During the game, we conceded 14 penalties. They conceded 11, but we only were given 4 of the 11 penalties that they conceded. Only 4 were kickable at goal, which we got 3 from those 4. We conceded 14 penalties, but 7 of those, including one that they had a penalty for, that they took the drop goal, but they had, including that drop goal, they had 6 of their kicks were successful of the 7 that they went for the posts. So we're immediately on the back foot because we're giving away penalties in danger zone for us, because probably we spent a lot of time. But if you look at the statistics, we had more possession, we had more territory. We made more meters than them. And yet, but I was just trying to, in my mind, think, well, what got us in the end? Regardless of what happened on the pitch, right? Because you can only pick. I thought our team was quite weak in certain positions. And when I was going through it, and I was just trying to compare the teams that we selected in the 2 previous Heineken Cup finals. So I just looked at sort of the differences, right? Lots of similarities, but Keenan, I thought, had a reasonable game. But, the guy that was there before him was Carney. He played 219 times for Leinster, 95 Ireland caps, 3 or 4 Lions caps. So oodles of experience, but also he was a leader within that team. Sexton was off, so he had Byrne. Again, I wouldn't say he's particularly a leader. And then you know, we had, like, say, if you look at our bench, like our bench was much stronger in those two finals. We had guys like
especially in
Jack,
the backs.
Jack, well, in the backs and the forwards, like Ed Byrne, I thought played reasonably well, but you had Jack McGrath, who was a lion, was in that match in Bilbao. You had Jemison Gibson Park was on the bench, and you had Carberry, you know, instead of Frawley. Frawley's got 34 Leinster caps. Osborne has 10 Leinster caps. Whereas the other guys, like, you know, they were hardly used. So they gave us no option. They were just there in case somebody got injured. They weren't able to be used as a strategic tool to bring on when we were down. But and then I got further thinking about it. Why were we? I did. But I was thinking, well, why were we so weakened, right? And so we contribute 3/4 of the Irish team. So all of our players go off and they, you know, the pinnacle of their career, either to play for the Lions or play for their country, right? So that's great achievement for them to go and play for Ireland. But the other provinces, by not producing an equal amount of internationals, puts a huge draw on our resources. So it's, you know, it's a very tough sport, international rugby. So we ended up getting fellas coming back injured. So Darius came back injured, Connors, Ryan, Ringrose, like they were out for 2 months. They hadn't played since the Scotland match on the 14th of March. Jemison Gibson Park hasn't played since that match. Sexton has had concussions playing for Ireland. They were all, you know, they were missing. Like we only got Ryan and Ringrose of those 6 lads back from injury for 40 or 50 minutes against Munster last weekend, but they hadn't played a competitive match since March. So they all came back into the team, or didn't come back into the team. And then there's the IRFU's policy of the 3 guys that I mentioned that have moved on for whatever reason, whether it's by being pushed or because they wanted to get, they felt they weren't going to get game time in Leinster. For whatever reason, they've left. Jack McGrath, Geordie Murphy, Joey Carberry were 3 guys that, and like you can't say that they're replacements. You know, Ed Byrne, I don't think he's a good player. He's not going to be the Lions loose head prop. You know,
better than Jack McGrath currently, though.
Okay, well, Jack McGrath's injured, right, and he has been injured for a while. But like 3 years ago, 4 years ago,
he's not at that level.
Yeah, he's just not. Like, you know, for all of the faith that Leinster might have in Frawley, he's still young enough. He's only 23. He's played 34 times for us, but he's not Joey Carberry yet. Do you know what I mean? Like, he hasn't played international rugby. He hasn't solidified his place in the Leinster team. He's still a young fella learning his trade, and hopefully he will have a strong career, but he's not there yet. Whereas Carberry had played for Ireland when he was sitting on the bench against Racing in Bilbao 3 years ago. So, you know, we're just three significant guys. Then you've also got the Carney has retired, Issa has retired, you know, so there's a deficit of leadership. There was massive amounts of leadership missing in that game. Like, even we had Fardy would be considered a leader within the group. He was on the bench. So you mentioned, you know, they brought on Baird. Baird has played, I think, 23 times for Leinster. He's 21. He's only played like, you know, a handful of I think I've written it down somewhere. He played a handful of starts. I think he's only actually started 10 games for Leinster, even though it's been a meteoric rise with 3 caps and 23 appearances. He hasn't actually started too many games. So he's not one of the guys that you go, and when I've played, I can remember losing in a final against Blackrock and thinking, Jesus, you know, we always had somebody that you turn to and you go, he's going to do something special in this game. And inevitably he would. And in the final, we turned to him and your man didn't do it. And there was no one else willing to grab it by the scruff of the neck. And I kind of felt that we were missing our leaders in the match, in that team sheet. And there was no one able to rescue it out of the fire.
Sure.
I've spoken for 20 minutes there, sorry.
That's okay.
You know, everything you say is absolutely valid. The only problem is there's nothing we can fucking do about it. And that is a problem, but it's a problem without a solution. I mean, the only way that we are going to be less reliant on our Irish internationals is to ship them off, because Munster, Connacht, Ulster aren't going to be in a position to take up the slack for 3 or 4 or 5, maybe 5 years anyway. I mean, could you know what's in that squad, in their squads now, right? So if they start now, it'll be 5 years before they have guys coming through. So we're not. It's just, we just have to live with it. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it. That's the problem. That's the if you like, the Faustian pact you make.
If you look back to that Saracens final in 2019, we were actually complaining of a similar thing, that we didn't have the backs on the bench, or we didn't have the strength on the bench that Saracens did. They had Will Skelton, I think, on the bench that day. Man who's played in 2 of our 3 knockout games in the games we've been knocked out in the last 3 seasons. They had him on the bench. We didn't have that kind of power on the bench. And at the time, we were complaining, and that was one of the things that lost it for us. Our bench, you just said, Jason, our bench now is a pale shadow of what it was against Racing and Saracens 2 and 3 years ago.
That raises questions about the coaching team. That if we know what has happened in the past, and we know that things aren't going to change, they have to come up with a way of getting around it, and they haven't yet.
Well, how do you come up with a way around?
Well, that's why they get paid the medium bucks.
Signing players in a pandemic, or
signing players isn't an answer, because we have. I mean, we're not going to sign those players. We're not going to get them.
Ensuring your players don't get injured.
The IRFU aren't going to allow somebody come in that's going to take the spot of one of the 4 Irish locks. That's just the way it is.
But that's the other option, is making sure you've got a full deck at this time of the season. Yeah. That's a lottery.
The other option, it is. You're right. But we still need a plan, John, and we didn't have a plan, and that's the most disappointing thing. We didn't look like we had a plan.
Have we taken our eye off the ball then to say, well, look at all the other teams, right? Just look how many foreigners are playing currently in Connacht. I know they're slightly different case, so we can kind of, but even they're signing Australian sevens players, your man, the guy from Papali'i from Rugby League, and there's probably, I know they're kind of a different case, right? But you got big name imports up in Ulster, or even going around and finding someone like Will Addison, who's a super player, but with Irish heritage or Irish blood, and bringing him into the mix. Likewise, down in Munster, we know what they've done with bringing in South Africans, but they've also kind of trawled around looking at for players who've got Irish blood, whether it's England/Ireland's Mike Healy or Halley, or even
Matt Gallagher.
Matt Gallagher from Saracens last year. Whereas, are we wedded to the whole OR Academy, or the schools and the academy, and it's all great? I'm sure we're the envy of the world. Like, that's great, and we are. You know what I mean? We are. When we were successful, those schools were also producing players, right? Like when we were successful, when we started being successful, or even prior to us being successful, those schools were still there. Michael's, Rock, Clongowes, Gonzaga, etc., were all producing players when we were losing in Lansdowne Road against Munster in 2006. But now that they're kind of are producing loads of players, they still had Rocky Elson, Brad Thorne, Easton Sea, like really good foreigners that were coming in, that were adding to the whole mix, rather than like the whole of our starting 15 were Irish qualified. I know James Lowe was born in New Zealand. Likewise, Fardy was obviously played for Australia. That was in the 23. And it's wonderful that you can kind of say, well, they're all kind of inverted commas homegrown, with the exception of the 2 lads born in New Zealand and Australia. You know, it's a wonderful thing to say, but ultimately, have we shot ourselves a little bit in the foot by not having, you know, an experienced former, I don't know, Australian scrum half or a former Australian centre or a former Australian hooker?
Yeah, you're probably right to a certain extent that because the national team is so dependent on Leinster players, Leinster have less flexibility to sign foreign players who might take spots away from those players. Munster and Ulster, and to a lesser extent Connacht, have all signed, you know, Munster and Ulster certainly have signed star names from abroad. But that's the IRFU have always done that. If a team looks to be drifting off the pace, particularly one of the big three, they tend to pump it up a bit. We were on the receiving end in 2008, 2009. We got a switch hitting, if you like, World Cup winning prop. We got the best non-All Black in New Zealand, and we got, you know, an absolute force of nature in Rocky. So that kind of helped get us up the thing. Same thing happened in Ulster in 2011.
I'm sorry, Dave, you could even add in Contapomi, you know, who in 07 was shortlisted into the top 3 of the World Player of the Year. He was there at the time. And you had the guy who sat on the bench behind Georgie Gregan, Chris Whitaker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and then you had obviously Stan Wright was there too. So you had 6 foreign-born players supplementing the likes of the 2 best centers in the world, a young Johnny Sexton that was
there was a broader spread of the location of the international squad was a much broader spread back then. I mean, there was elements of it where, I mean, it wasn't exactly the case, but the old joke was it was the Munster pack and the Leinster backs. You know, there was 1 or 2 Leinster forwards and 1 or 2 Munster backs, and, you know, the odd Ulster guy thrown in for good measure. But the spread was wider. The Irish team wasn't as dependent on Leinster players as it is at the moment. And at the end of the day, despite what we all might like to think, what we all might like to want, and we all want Heineken Cups, and we all want this, we all want that. At the end of the day, the only thing that really matters to the RFU is the Six Nations, or, you know, the international team. That's the be all and end all, because that's what keeps the game in this country going.
But there's an old rugby expression, and it was a strong Ulster side will mean a strong Ireland side. So in other words, they were always considered a team. Like, Connacht didn't really contribute anything to the 5 Nations national team. Leinster and Munster predominantly supplied 90% of the players. But if Ulster can cough up sort of 20% of the team, that, you know, it always meant that there was extra competition for places there. But it does seem
when Ulster were at their strongest, Ireland was probably at its weakest.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. But like, this was probably going back before those days. But like, I just felt that, you know, all these guys coming back into the Leinster camp injured really, really knocked us. Like, you could see the results. I mean, okay, we beat Munster in that Pro 14 final, and then our match against Toulon was cancelled, and then we had a match against Exeter, nothing then for a couple of weeks, and our match against Munster where we lost. Like, it was far from ideal preparation. But I thought that, like, even the guys like, say, Levy, who wasn't playing international rugby, took the opportunity to have so, you know, we were really, really down to our bare bones in our strongest position in the back row, when we probably have 8, 9, or 10 of the top back row of we probably have 8 of the top 10 back rowers in the country playing in our club, but probably 5 of them were injured.
Yeah, and like, one of the things is, like, just specifically to La Rochelle, there were guys missing who I feel would have made a material difference in that game. I feel that Dan Idiot Mark II would have made a big difference in terms of Will Connors with his chop tackling. It's one of the sure ways to stop a big guy. And we were missing Jemison Gibson Park, who would have been able to negate Kerr Barlow. coming from that New Zealand system. I mean, here's the thing, right? And I said it during the
Insane,
week.
insane,
I said it on the
insane
week
that.
in the week during Leinster fans, right? Ireland produces maybe one world-class scrum half every 20 years or so. I think that's pretty much the record. Why don't we just go out and sign a world-class scrum half? It's not like they're blocking anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, it would make a huge
I
difference.
I couldn't agree more with you, but you know, and I was just about, I actually, just
I
before
mean,
we
look,
started.
I'm a big fan of Luke McGrath. I like Luke McGrath. I like his attitude. I like him as a player, but he's, you know, he is what he is, and he is what he is now. He's not going to, in the next year or two, he's not going to turn into Conor Murray, right?
But like
Lee Madison's going cheap.
Let's forget it.
I would say there's probably two in each of the other three provinces. I would suggest there's actually a better scrum half than Luke McGrath, right? So you wouldn't say
necessarily agree with you, but what I would say is we'd say your I'll take your point as read, right, and I'll say that's okay, right?
Okay,
but
and I would actually say
like,
in some provinces I would actually say that there's two players better than that, two scrum halves better than him, and I would actually argue then that the guy that Jamison Gibson Park, even though he's selected on the bench for Ireland at the moment, he doesn't get a look in when it comes to selection for Leinster. Luke McGrath played, like say last season, Luke McGrath played 5 of the 6 Heineken Cup matches, plus the match against Saracens, and generally gets the nod in the bigger games for Leinster in this season. He played against Munster, he played against Montpellier, and he played, obviously, it's unfair to kind of judge him since the Six Nations because Gibson Park has been injured, so obviously it's going to be Murray. But I feel that Luke McGrath is not too dissimilar, and like they love him, the coaches love him, and he's obviously very well thought of as a leader and so on. But so's your man. So there's plenty of other players that are good leaders. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're a international standard. Like, you're playing for Leinster, you have to be there and thereabouts on the national team. Now, you can disagree with me, that's fine, of whether of his pecking order within Ireland, but he's not in the top 3 currently, according to some of the Irish coaches, and I would tend to agree with them. And I'd say Caelan Blade would actually be ahead of him as well.
My point is, whether he's the best of the non-Conor Murray scrum halves or the worst of the non-Conor Murray scrum halves, after Conor Murray, to paraphrase Bill Hicks, there's a real fucking drop-off, right? The next best is basically the tallest dwarf, right? So, and if you look back over the last 60 years, or like we're all in our 50s, so we can think about guys, have we ever produced more than one world-class scrum half every 20 years or so? No. So why don't we admit that we fucking know nothing about scrum half play in Ireland, can't coach it, can't judge it, and let's just forget about it and sign a fucking good scrum half?
Yeah.
I mean, you look at, say, there's guys playing club rugby in Wales. We say, I'm going to pick a name, Thomas Williams, Lloyd Williams, anyone Williams, who are far better than anything we have here except for Conor Murray. And they're average club players in Wales. We just don't know scrum half play in Ireland. We can't coach it. We don't know anything about it. We don't produce them. We choose one every 20 years, which is in the realms of fluke. So let's just forget about it and sign a world-class scrum half. And I'm not talking about getting a guy who's, might be at the end of a contract, might fancy a spell in the Northern Hemisphere. I mean, going out and targeting a guy the way we did Rocky Alsam, or the way Ulster did Charles Piatow, or the way Munster did R.G. Sneeman. Get the best.
I completely agree with you. Because, if you're playing for a club that consistently gets into either the final or the semi-final of Europe, we're ranked 4th in Europe at the moment, right? So you're kind of a big cheese. And if you're not there or thereabouts on the national team, like, what's wrong with you? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the standard that you have to be. But I think that Leinster, the coaches love him, and they have to manage two squads because they have given 3/4 of their team away to the national side. And in sometimes they send away, 16, 17 guys with Ireland. Not all of them will make the match day 23, but they're away training in camp. And you have someone like Luke McGrath, and he's not too dissimilar to say Leo Cullen was back in the day, a good standard player. But like Leo got 30 Ireland caps. His peers were Mal O'Kelly got 90, Donnacha O'Callaghan got 90, Paul O'Connell captained the Lions and has 120 or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So those guys were collecting lots and lots of caps. Leo was back in Leinster managing the boat while everyone else was away, been, nurturing through the younger guys, making sure that, and as a result, probably as an individual, it probably made him a great guy as he's got older, and made him into a great coach because it showed him that you can still be, a decent person, that you're club captain, that you can people have problems off the field, that they go to you and look up to you and so on. And I just feel that's the way Luke is being molded to be, maybe to the detriment of the team, that because it's a weakness in our team. Like we saw in Newcastle 2 years ago, he box kicked and it didn't go. He didn't make his touch a second before halftime or a few seconds before halftime, and they played it and took advantage and scored just on the stroke of halftime. And we gave up a 10-0 lead to go in 10-all at halftime in that final. And when we had moments that game needed leadership, it was hard. I didn't see any. I just didn't see somebody grabbing the game by the scruff of the neck last Sunday, because all of our leaders were gone. Sexton was gone. Ruddock was off the pitch after 25 minutes. Fardy was still sitting on the bench. Sexton was injured, and like the one guy that needed to be the leader was Luke McGrath, and I don't think he showed us in that game.
Well,
I don't know about that. Well, I kind of have to agree with you on the evidence. To a certain extent, I feel bad about talking about Luke McGrath like this because he's a guy I like. I happen to think he's the best of the rest, but that's not saying very much. Others could disagree with me, and they have perfectly legitimate. People say Cooney, people say Marmion. I know Joe Schmidt thought Marmion was the best of the rest. Quaylen Blade, these are all good players. The young fella Casey now in Munster, these are all brilliant players. It doesn't really matter because
Rory O'Connor suggested him for the Lions.
Who, Luke McGrath?
Yeah.
I did see he wasn't alone in that. There was a couple of guys talking about, at the start of who this weekend will make their case for the Lions, and talking about Ellis Genge, and they were talking about, and Luke McGrath was a guy who came into it. Obviously crazy stuff, but anyway. We haven't sent a scrum half. Before Conor Murray, who was the last Irish scrum half to go on the Lions?
John Robbie,
yeah. That just shows you where we're at, like.
Yeah, there has been very few, top quality scrum halves. You're going back to Mick Bradley. Sometimes Luke McGrath's passing isn't far off Mick Bradley's, but not. I don't know if I go that far. No, okay, fine. But Luke, it was only that Paul Dean had hands of a surgeon.
Yeah.
And then
but that was it. We had Mick Bradley, would say, from 84 through to 95.
Yeah, probably 10 years there.
And the guy was as brave as he was, like an extra flanker. He was brilliant. We got a lot of advantage out of that, but he was very deficient in the passing. Now, he was a brilliant decision maker. He was a great kicker. He was a brilliant tackler, but he was deficient as a passer. The guy who kind of came in was, if you remember, knocked him out for maybe a season or two, was Gus Ahern.
Yeah,
great passer, very classical style scrum half. Not a great decision maker, though. Made bad choice. And scrum half, he'd handle the ball more than any other player on the pitch. And every time he handles the ball, he has to make choices. He has more choices than any other player on the pitch as well. Because when a prop gets the ball, his thought process isn't, oh, should I put a little dink in here or should I kick it? The scrum half has to have that process. And Fergus Ahern didn't. We are great at producing imperfect scrum halves.
Yeah, Yeah, we are. I agree. Like,
Sorry, just finish that off, because I do want to say something positive about. One of the reasons why we're so good at it is because those scrum halves are often very good at 2 out of the 3 things that are needed, and they're always really game lads as well. It has to be said.
Yeah, I agree. We're there was a lot of talk about having a lack of bulk in the team, and it's interesting. Like, say, prior to the World Cup, Toner was jettisoned in favor of a more bulkier guy, John Klein. And we it's sort of just seemed strange that we need, we kind of to fight fire with fire and have it up against a very large pack, that we continued with Toner when someone like Joe Schmidt jettisoned him from the squad because we were going to go for more bulk. But we do have some big guys like that. Isn't that guy Jack Dunn? He's huge, isn't he?
James Ryan is huge.
Yeah, we don't have
squad. Huge. Charlie Ryan is huge.
I mean, some of the commentary was like, we don't have a power guy. We should have gone out and signed a big guy like Brad Thorne. Brad Thorne wasn't a big guy.
Mm.
Brad Thorne was
out very big.
Huh?
He tugged out very big.
Tugged out big, but he was what, 6'5", 6'6", maybe 6'6". He was closer, I think he was closer to 6'4", 6'5", but he was registered at 6 foot, and he was about 17 stone. I mean, he wasn't a massive guy. It's what he did with it. It's not about signing a big guy. It's all about what you do with it.
It's not the dog in the fight. It's the fight in the dog, Dave.
It's when the dog chooses to apply the fight.
Yeah, it was. But
if we're, I mean, look, the Irish provinces, you're going to get you're always going to get outliers where, like, Munster signed Sneyman, or we signed Brad Thorne, or Ulster signed whoever. You're always going to get outliers. But Irish rugby players, as a whole, aren't massively, hugely powerful guys, right? And that's kind of one of the beauties of rugby, that there are many different ways of playing the game. So we should try and play a game that doesn't need massively big, powerful guys and is capable of nullifying them.
Well, that brings me straight back to the point of, we didn't move them around. We didn't make them work. We didn't tire them out. Like, that was the classic game that Leinster would play against Montpellier, all the big French packs that we tugged out against. We moved them around. We made them work hard, and we didn't let them rest. We didn't let them have breaks between set pieces. We just kept the ball in play to tire the bastards out and move them around the pitch as much as possible. Kick in behind them, make them run towards us. Get them, just everything you can do to move those big lads around the field as much as possible, and have them with their hands on their knees, breathing out their arse. And we didn't do it. We could have done it. I'm sure.
We never took them out of their comfort zone in terms of fitness or mobility.
Exactly. And maybe the coaches had a plan to do it, but we didn't execute it, or I don't know what the answer is. But while we're looking for excuses, why don't we just throw in the old, our league doesn't test us out, and we roll over teams every week.
I normally don't. I normally don't give much credit to that argument, although this season I do, because not because the league is. It's just
get the ball out there.
But the whole league, including ourselves, have been fairly crap this year.
Yeah.
But it's just because of the circumstances. It's not because it's an inherently crap league. Although a lot of the teams have dropped off. Huh?
Mightn't be next year. We'll see how they.
No, next year to make it. So I watched some of the South African Rainbow Cup games, and the sooner the better is all I can say.
Like,
did you see a man do his knee?
I did. I didn't. I don't like watching those things.
No, but I thought the attitude was. I thought the attitude of the commentators was funny, because the guy was lying on the ground roaring swear words, and the commentator goes, "We would like to apologise to any of the viewers if you heard any upsetting language there, but sometimes these things hurt."
Yeah. And then they kind of show it again and again and again. Yeah.
With still with the swear words in it.
Yeah, so that mightn't show you. You mightn't hear the swears, but you'll see the guy's knee bending backwards. But like, we're just going back to like the league, the quality of the league, and I take that point, and we've said this many times before. However, like team, all of the Irish players play in the Pro 14, and we beat England. This season we've beaten Northampton and we've beaten Montpellier. Montpellier are in the final of the Challenge Cup. Like we beat them over there, where they're kind of tuned in and turned on. And both of those Heineken Cup round 1 and round 2 matches, we put 35 points on. Like, I think I heard Lancaster talking during the week, and he said, he said since he started training there, so it's 5 years. In the 5 years, our average in a Heineken Cup match, regardless of opposition, is 4.5 tries per game. So we can say, oh, we hammer the Dragons and we hammer Edinburgh, or whichever of the other teams in the league, but we actually hammer the other clubs as well.
Yeah,
and it's like, 1 year we got to the final and won it. 1 year we got to the final and came second. Like that happens. You can't win everything. 1 year you get to the semi-final and we're beaten by a much better team on the day. But if we played them 5 times, maybe they might win all 5 games. But like they're there and thereabouts. Like we seem to oscillate between the best time that we win 1 game and we're the best side ever. We lose 1 game and we're the worst side ever. Like it's not that black and white. It's just not.
We are, as we have been every year pretty much since 2009, one of the 4 best sides in Europe, and one of the 4 sides who can win it, who can go into a season with a realistic hope of winning the competition. That's what we are, and that's what we still are. And what you say is right. I mean, one of the complaints that people make is the league can't be any good because Leinster walked through it. Now I'm not going to talk about this year because this year has been a different set of circumstances, right? But up until this season, the complaint has always been, oh, the league's rubbish. Look at the way Leinster waltzed through. The reason Leinster waltzed through is because Leinster are a really fucking good team. Leinster waltzed through the European group most years as well.
Yeah.
Now I think this year has been a special set of circumstances. The teams have been particularly crap this year, but I think we have as well. I don't think we've been very good this year in the Pro 14.
Well, we've been good on certain days, but we were beat. We'll get to it shortly, but like we were beaten by Connacht, we were beaten by Ospreys, and we were beaten by Munster in the Rainbow Cup. Like, that's 3 defeats this season compared to going unbeaten the previous year. Okay, we played Saracens, but I'm talking about sort of Pro 14 action.
Yeah, I think our standard of the Pro 14, I think the standard of all the leagues, but I'm only concerned about the Pro 14. I don't really care about the other ones in terms of whatever. I think the standard of Pro 14 this year, because of the set of circumstances we find ourselves in, was lower.
But like we've seen it when we've seen like when BT get behind it, it's the best league in the world. Sorry, the Guinness. That's right. What's called the Gallagher Premiership, the greatest league in the world with the best players, so on, so on, so on. And like there's some very good teams in it. Of course, there is. Bristol and Exeter are excellent sides, but there's a lot of dross, and we know there's a lot of dross. But BT won't tell you that. Whereas from the Pro 14's point of view, the media is against it. I mean, you hear nothing but negativity towards the league. Of course, this has lots of issues, but it has never got a fair go. And it was only really for the 3 fleeting years that Sky were doing it, that they would kind of bang a drum for it and make it as though, like we get to the Lions, there's 20 of the 37 Lions are playing our league. More than half of the players play in our league that are picked on the Lions. So, do you know what I mean? You've got that quality. Now, not all of them play. And unfortunately, even ones when they are picked for their sides, especially the Welsh ones, they don't seem to turn up for a lot of the games. But, but just going back to our game very briefly, like if Larmer had got that pass away to McGrath, if Ryan Baird had have held on to that ball that he kind of juggled when he went for the intercept, it could have been such a different game if those 2 moments had us stuck.
Antes and balls.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, but that shows you sport. Sport is a game. I mean, sport is a game. Sport swings on momentum an awful lot, and momentum changing events can have a huge difference on a game. A team that's playing brilliantly well can have one thing go against them, and suddenly they're not so good anymore, and or their performance drops off within the space of a minute. But that's the way it is. I mean, at the end of the day, we were well beaten, and we deserved to be beaten, and the better team won. The team with the better tactics, the better selection, the team who played the better game won. It's as simple as that. I mean,
the team with the better coach, Dave. Let's call it the team with the better coach.
Well, at the end of the day, we can complain all we like. Everybody can complain all they like about all the hype Rog got, right? Rog's in a Heineken Cup final.
He is indeed, and fair play to him.
It's just funny you were talking about Sky, like, and I remember seeing one of the producers on Sky was on one of those BBC talkback programs where they have an audience and they ask questions, and it was I think he was the managing director or the managing editor of Sky Sports, and the guy says, "Look, I like watching football, but I think Sky are ridiculous. I mean, the hype you give to Fleetwood Town versus Chorley, you think it was Man United against Liverpool," and the editor said, "Look. If you're a Fleetwood Town fan or a Chorley fan, your biggest night of the week is the night your team plays. So why doesn't that deserve the 3 hours that Man United get or Liverpool get? Because for you, that's as big as it gets and there can never be enough hype." And that's Sky's attitude has always been that for the people who are going to watch the game, they want that. And that was their attitude to the Pro 14. Unfortunately, they didn't stick around long enough.
Yeah. I know I shouldn't do it, but I just listened to a couple of podcasts, and you would swear, I know Dave, and I give him the daggers there, but you would swear, according to some of the RTE panel, that we were beaten by about 8 points and that we hardly got out of our own 22 during the game.
Would that be somebody who's no relation by any chance?
That's the man. But I mean,
I'm gonna have to do something in the courts about getting that name taken off.
Yeah, exactly. Depot. Anyway, look, I'm going to draw a line under that now. We've spoke about it for 40 minutes. And I'm sure you watched the Leicester-Ulster match on Friday night. Like, how did Ulster lose that game? They were winning 17-6 at half time.
Talent is what did it.
No, stupidity is what did it. I mean, okay, right, they lost Cooney. Cooney's a massive player for Ulster, right? He's a huge player for them. And they lost him fairly early on the second half. But the pattern that had already been set, the way Ulster were playing in the second half, was the way they continued to play in the second half. Shit.
He went at 43 minutes, so it was pretty much start. But I thought Ben Young was coming on.
Didn't he box kick his first 2 balls?
He did. I'm not sure. I can't remember.
And then they continued to box kick the ball.
Yeah, he did. But I thought when Ben Youngs came on, he made a severe contribution to that. I mean, I thought he was outstanding when he came on, and they kind of coincided. I think Cooney went off after 43 minutes and Youngs came on at 45, and the 35 minutes he was on, he was Young's
always been a very good player.
Yeah, he has. And I was surprised that he was decided not to. I think his wife is pregnant actually, so he decided not to go on the lines. Lowry at 10 I thought was good. I thought he looked like but Matheson just kicked everything away. Not dissimilar to what happened with our match.
Ulster Cognoscente have been saying that Lowry should be playing at 10. He played at 10 in his school's career. It's his natural position, but there's a fear in Ulster that he's too small for the position. Now, maybe that's why they were playing him at fullback to kind of toughen him up and see if he could survive, and which he did, in fairness. So maybe we might see more of him at 10 because, I mean, Billy Burns...
He's picked at 10 against Munster tomorrow night, by the way.
Billy Burns, God love him, is a good trier and a talented rugby player, but he's not going to win anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, I just thought to kind of set the tone for the weekend of all of our picks that we went for our tips.
Yeah, we really are nailed on, aren't we?
Just go for the opposite. Go for the opposite what we pick.
So I'm Leinster are going to lose to Connacht this weekend. I'm definitely predicting it.
Yeah, well, they're well. So I mentioned is we conquered Montpellier. They made it to the final of the Challenge Cup. They beat Bath. 1910. Again,
A real
another
thriller.
a real thriller, but again, another error from us. We all went for Bath in that game as well.
Yeah.
That's us believing the BT hype, Jay.
Must be. We jumped on the train. Okay, so the Lions were announced today. So there's 8 Irish. Couple of surprises. I definitely wasn't expecting Bundy Aki to get the nomination.
No.
And delighted for
Right.
Jack. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, you can see why with Bundy Aki. A, Warren Gatland, like Joe Schmidt, loves his big backs. B, they're playing South Africa. In South Africa, you probably need a few big, strong boys. And Gary Ringrose being of the willowy type in comparison to Bundy Aki. To me, a superior player. I know not to your taste always, Jason, but
Oh, I wish he just passed a bit more, John. I think he's a fine player.
but you know, for me, if I was picking an Ireland team every day, I'd be picking Gary Ringrose. Having said that, Bundy Aki isn't like a million miles behind him either. He's close enough. And having Aki and Henshaw together at 12 and 13 is a great combo. Having Henshaw at 12 and Ringrose at 13 is also a great combo. But
one thing about Gatland is he is at this stage a very experienced tourist and tour manager.
Sure.
And Bundy Aki will be a great tourist.
Sure.
Whether he plays in the tests or not, he'll be a great man in that squad. That squad will all, really, he'll help immensely, that squad. Whether on the pitch or off.
If someone's laptop's nicked, he'll go into some township.
Well, that's the kind of thing he does. I mean,
he'll go into Soweto.
he could end up in the John Bentley of this tour,
Yeah, I know. He's kind of, but you saw him like even when Connacht won when Ireland won the Grand Slam as well. I remember in Twickenham, he got them all into a circle and they were doing some sort of dance or clapping thing. Yeah. Another, I'm delighted, Jack Conan. Like,
he's had a
what
tough
a roller,
yeah.
what a roller coaster that lad's had. He was playing, went over to the World Cup in Japan, got injured over there, came back. The rehab seemed to take a lot longer than was originally suggested. In the meantime, Darris was discovered and hit the ground running, became an Irish international fairly instantaneously.
Nailed on lines tourist.
Go back to last September and go on Blues Talk or any program and say Jack Conan will go on the Lions tour ahead of Billy Vunipola and watch people roll around the floor laughing at you, going, "You absolute moron! You obviously know nothing about rugby." And there's Jack Conan now.
I'm glad we all predicted it, John.
Well, exactly, yeah. There's Billy Vunipola. In fairness, has lost a lot of A, fitness, and B, form. And actually, I'm shocked there are 5 Saracens players more than anybody else.
Yeah.
In the, considering England looked very blunt on their diet of Saracens players in the Six Nations. I'm just shocked that there are, obviously there's quality there, and Owen Farrell is a cracking player. Mero Itoje is world class. There's a couple of they said Elliot Daly is probably there because of his long boot on his versatility of
interswitching positional. And the thing we have to remember is
in the high felt, a guy like that with a big boot is a big advantage. But
he's not my
players. He's not mine either. But
no, I'm not talking about Elliot Daly. Sorry, I was going to say, as a coach, Gatland isn't my cup of tea. But the guy has won more Grand Slams in Ireland.
Yeah.
Where as many Grand Slams as Ireland.
In their history.
He kind of knows what he's doing. Much as I hate to admit it.
His results speak for themselves.
Yeah.
He changed Ireland's trajectory. He went on to Wasps. He went, and brought them to 2 Heineken Cups. He brought Wales from the wilderness to several. Well, okay, they won a Grand Slam under Ruddock, but he brought them into a new place, and they've never been the same since. And they won a championship this year, but they were never the same previously. The guys love or hate him, and a lot of people seem to hate him. his results speak for themselves. This is his fourth Lions tour, third as head coach. You know, he's got the pedigree coming out as wazoo.
I always think that, for me, I don't think he's a great head coach. I think he's a great director of rugby. And I think that's what he actually is. In that he runs a very good college of coaches. Do you know that? And this isn't meant to be damning with faint praise. This is actually the hardest thing to do. He gets good coaches working together and points them all in the right direction under his guidance. I think that's his real skill.
That's fair, and that seems to be his role, as you say. So,
and he's and again, it has to be said, he is a good tourist. My father-in-law was at the last Lions tour, and he'd know a couple of the Lions players' parents. And Warren Gatlin's wife organises the families really well, and they're super happy on tour. And a happy family means a happy player.
Yeah, well, you know, the guy is doing something right.
Yeah,
simple as that.
I think so.
He's a bit grisly in real life, like you know, as you'd expect. But I think he's a very committed kind of a bloke, and he's got this anti-establishment streak in him. Like, he's got this won't bend the knee for anybody streak in him. That's kind of stubborn and that alienates him from a lot of people. But
it's funny. And you say, like, I mean, and you're right, of course, that he has this anti-establishment thing in him. Could there be a more establishment job than coach of the British and Irish Lions?
That's exactly it. That was my point. Like, how does he? You know, we're all walking contradictions to some degree, but how does he fit those things into his CV? Like, you just said it. He's the ideal tour. He's a very good tourist, and at the same time, he's a contrary bastard who doesn't like authority. You know, it's funny, but it works. And the guy, whatever you say about him, and we have he's got history with us, and we've got history with him for various reasons over the years. But he seems to be able to pull it out of the. And he has the people who know him, and I don't mean, you know, people who actually know him, who've played for him or played with him or played under him, know what he brings, and I'm sure he doesn't spare fools or doesn't suffer fools, but you know, he's obviously loyal and looks after his players and looks after the people underneath him. So
I always got the feeling about Gatland he doesn't actually give a fuck what you think about him.
Exactly.
I mean, you could go on tour with him or play for him at club or international level, and then, you know, call him every F and B under the sun. But if he thinks that you're the best guy in the team, he'll pick you the next week as well, because he doesn't give a shit. Like, he doesn't care what you think about him, in a good way.
Well, I wouldn't say that's true, really, because, you know, you've got.
I don't see him giving Eddie O'Sullivan a job.
Eddie Dagger, you've got to have. You've got to be able to bring players together. You've got to have some empathy to be a good head coach. So I don't buy this. He doesn't know. He doesn't give a shit about anybody thinks of him. He has to be able to pull players together.
Let me put it this way: he doesn't let it get in the way of his professionalism.
Of course.
Well, we saw what he did to O'Driscoll. Or not it did to O'Driscoll, but he wasn't afraid to take a hard decision. Everyone knew it was going to be O'Driscoll's last match, last tour. You know, an absolute, the most famous Lions player of his generation, and he said, "Sorry, you're not playing the last game."
I don't think he did it. I don't think he did it to O'Driscoll.
No, he didn't.
But he did it on purpose.
I don't know whether he did.
That it would have on A, the team, and B.
No. I just think he's not afraid to make hard decisions. Nothing to do. He's not going to bite his nose to spite his face. He felt that O'Driscoll, there was a better player than O'Driscoll there, and he wasn't afraid to make that decision, and that's what he did. And that takes a lot of guts. And it's very simple.
I do still think that the best partnership on that tour we only saw once was Manu Tuolangi and Brian O'Driscoll.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. But one thing that he did do, right? He picked two Scottish coaches, and the two Scottish coaches did their little
Eight
bit
Scottish
for
players.
Scotland by getting 8 Scottish players. And how you can tell me Chris Harris, Ali Price, and Van der Merwe deserve to get picked on that team is
Who? Sorry, Chris Harris.
Van der Merwe,
Duhan van der
the South
Merwe.
African guy.
Duhan van der Merwe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's gone to the Lions.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to read that squad again. I didn't notice that. Otherwise, I mean, Chris
Yeah.
Harris is. I mean, he. In fairness to Chris Harris, he's done a brilliant job on Top Gear. I mean, he's turned it round. But
Yeah. But like, I mean, how Henry Slade isn't in that team?
I mean,
You know?
I'd be more annoyed
So-
for the players. I mean, I can actually understand
But
why
like,
the Irish
but
guys
going
didn't,
back-
get picked, didn't get picked. I'd be more annoyed for somebody
yeah.
like Henry
No, no.
Slade.
Oh, absolutely. But like, I mean, you know, these Lions tours are notorious for how they're selected.
Yeah.
Like 20 years ago, Donal Lenihan was the manager. He pulled every single card that he had to get Ronan O'Gara on the side, or not on the side, on the touring party, which he did. He managed to get O'Gara going. But he had no cards left to play to bring Dennis Hickey. So
But
Dennis
hasn't he
Hickey was
already-
left behind.
Hadn't he said a couple of years ago that Dennis Hickey would never play for a team of his
Yeah,
after South Africa?
after the South African winger broke his cheekbone on him.
Yeah.
Or broke his cheekbone, Hickey's cheekbone.
Yeah.
That guy went on to play for Ulster in that final in '82.
Yeah, he went on to play for. He was a
Nine-
very
or
good
02.
player, Stefan
12.
Turner. He was a very good player.
Sir Blanche, yeah. Yeah, but like that's the way Lions tours
Yeah.
are,
There's always a bit of controversy.
organized, that everybody kind of tries to push their own. Like there's 3 Welsh guys, there's 1 Kiwi, and there's a Scottish. But like just one of the Welsh and one of the Scottish are obviously the 2 national Scottish teams coaches. So like hence there's 10 Welsh in it. Like you're telling me there's 4 Leinster players, but there's also 4 Scarlets players. Like I can
Well,
kind of
the
get.
Six Nations.
Yeah, okay, I can kind of get that. But up to the end of the start of the Six Nations, they were on a huge losing streak since
Yeah.
the World Cup. Like they, you know, like if you go back, even say Scotland, right? Scotland for the
I
last
can't believe
2 Six
Duhan
Nations.
van der Merwe went. I forgot.
Yeah.
I must have blanked that out in some psychological thing.
Say so. Scotland in the last 2 Six Nations have won 3 of the 5 games, which is fair enough. But before that, like in the 2019 season, they lost 4 of their 5 games. They didn't make it out of their pool in the World Cup, which was our pool. You know what I mean? They were atrocious. But so, like for example, he's gone and he's selected 5 guys from Saracens, who how we saw how rubbish they were during the Six Nations, totally undercooked. Like England, the worst Six Nations finish in a decade.
Yeah, but those are. I mean,
And hold on. And now you could say that all those guys that he's selected have all done it previously. Yes, they have.
Yeah.
They got to World Cup final. They
and so
won Grand
so-
Slams.
and
All that.
the other
stuff,
side of
right?
that argument is so is James
But
Ryan,
the other
etc.,
side-
etc. Yeah.
And then the other side of the argument is if you're going back that far, look how crap Scotland were back at that point. But because they've got 2 coaches, they've managed to get 8 players in. Like
There are the one Scottish player even that I would never have on the tour. I'm sorry, I don't care. I know everybody thinks he's great, and it's not because of Johnny Sexton, but I would have picked Reece Priestland ahead of him, and that's
Finn Russell.
Finn Russell.
Yeah, I don't see why he's there. He's not a typical Lions player. Like the fact that he went off and got the hump and left in the middle of it, too, like he just doesn't seem to have the temperament to be a Lions player. Did they get him to be on the midweek team? Presumably, although you'd think that's Dan Bigger's role as well. So I don't know.
I have a feeling Dan Bigger might be the test out half.
Oh, definitely. That's who I think it would be. I actually thought that they might have brought Cooney as an absolute outsider, purely because with the 2 Scottish coaches, they were always going to bring Finn Russell, and he doesn't kick. So therefore, I thought they were going to bring Cooney in that would take over kicking in those midweek games. But
I suppose that's why they have Elliot Daly.
Yeah, maybe so.
I just think Farrell is nailed on for the 10 jersey for them. No?
Yeah, look, like you know yourself, they picked 37 guys. It's probably going to be another 5 or 7 guys
Yeah,
that are going to
there
fly out,
usually is, yeah.
because there's always injuries. Oh, like especially South Africa will be trying to knock lumps out of them. They're quite.
What's the provincial program like for this tour? Is it quite?
They haven't announced it. They haven't announced it, but presumably they're going to play all 5 of there or all 4.
Because I remember, like in '97, everybody remembers '97.
Mm.
But I remember '97 Lions going down to play like the likes of Mpumalanga or whatever, and getting 7 kinds of shite knocked out of them.
Was that the match that Daddy Weir got his
Yeah, it was,
cartilage
yeah.
done? Yeah.
Yeah. But I remember
Yeah.
those games. I mean, South Africa, if you don't manage the tour right in terms of the games you play, you could find yourself calling up 10, 12 guys. Because it's the pitches are hard, so there's a lot of attrition, just natural attrition.
Yeah, but they go and try and kick the shit out of you.
And then you add a couple of beefy Afrikaners trying to beat 7 kinds of lumps out of you. It makes
no, but they kind of nearly do it for their country, you know.
Oh yeah, they do. Yeah,
like,
they're not doing it.
Like it's kind of they're not playing for Western Province.
They'll take a red card for the Springboks, like.
Yeah.
There's no question of that.
Anyway, at least.
I mean, from an Irish perspective, it's hard to argue with any of the guys who didn't get picked, or whatever about other teams and other players and Scots or whatever. There are guys who don't have the body of work behind them because of injury or whatever, and B, I mean, they're worried about. I mean, I think Gatland was. What he said about Johnny Sexton was probably unfair, but true.
Yeah, you drew attention to that earlier, Jason. The fact that they reckoned that Johnny Sexton just wasn't durable enough for 3 tests against the Springboks, which
I can't really argue with that.
No, but some people would have said that after the Six Nations he was nailed on to tour, whether he was nailed on as a test.
He was the most prolific place kicker. I think he had 86% success rate. So you know what I mean. His kicking stats were there during the Six Nations.
Very well as well.
Yeah, he was playing very well. Like I mean, if you think about it,
we could come to
played a full game against England.
Where the Lions tour kicks off or departs, and Johnny Sexton still hasn't played again. So I suppose, you know, he has access to information we don't.
Yeah, and maybe like in hindsight, it mightn't be a bad thing if Sexton has 6 months off and he comes back next September.
Yeah, you take summer off and get rested up and get ready to spend the season injured for Leinster.
Well,
it's a good thing for Leinster, but it's
a good thing for Ireland. It mightn't be necessarily a good thing for Leinster.
It may not be a good thing for the Lions.
All the same, he could come back the week after next, be playing out of his skin. Finn Russell has a sulk halfway through, falls out with Townsend, and Sexton's back out in the red jersey. You never know.
Oh, I can see him getting added to the squad. I mean, look at the amount of people that get added. What's the statistic? 10 players or something.
Oh yeah, I'd be very surprised if there were any less than 5 to 10 players added to the squad at various points during the thing. Let's just hope. I think loads of the Irish players should go on safari in Lesotho.
Well, hold on. I was just about to say, there's no way you can do that shit nowadays. You can't just pick your holidays.
You can do anything you want. You can do anything you want if you've got Lions money behind you, John.
The proximity 6, what were they called? The lads out in New
Geography
Zealand.
7.
The Geography 7. Well, there you go. There won't be any Geography 7 this time because, how are you going to get to South Africa in a pandemic?
In one of the many very expensive private planes the Lions can afford because it's the biggest thing in rugby.
Okay.
Well, speaking of that,
and it's not like South Africa hasn't got any experience of corralling people into areas.
Controversial.
Little bit of politics there.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I mean, speaking of quarantine, we've seen Leinster when they came home from France. They had to put 46 guys up at their own expense. 30K cost them in the Radisson Blue Hotel out in Stillorgan for 5 nights at the bequest of the Irish government. So that didn't come cheap. That was 30K apparently, according to the Irish Times. So, I suppose the players can go to a quarantine if they want, but it does cost.
Yeah, I mean.
Anyway.
Could they not pretend they had boob jobs or something?
Rory Sutherland.
Marty Moore wasn't playing for Leinster.
That's a man who doesn't need any artificial enhancement.
Rory Sutherland, anyone? Any reason why he should be going on the Lions tour?
Is he one of the chefs?
he's named in a Lions tour. I know you've already said Chris Harris, but like, hello.
Where's he from?
What's going on? Well, there you go. Where's he from? Who is he? What, you know, we're rugby fans. We don't bloody know where he's from. Ali Price, at least we've heard of.
Ali Price is a good player, in fairness.
He's a better player than Mr. Price, seeing as they're going to South Africa.
Oh, very good, very good.
But, you know, Chris Harris and Rory Sutherland just jump out as names to me that, like, who?
Actually, when you're talking about Mr. Price, I thought it was really funny the other day. Some of the Tony Ward wrote a piece in the paper, apparently, where he talked about the Super Rugby or the South African franchises coming into Pro 14, and he got some criticism in South Africa because he said the Blue Bulls or Northern Transvaal and or because those were the team names he knew them on, and there was a lot of criticism in some of the South African newspapers about him using the apartheid era names for the regions. And then I watched the Bulls on at the weekend, and they were wearing the bloody Northern Transvaal badge.
Are they?
Yeah.
Anyway, Hamish Watson, absolutely fair enough.
Of course,
great player.
Of course, Tony Ward went on tour in 1980. Oh, actually, he didn't. He refused to go, didn't he?
Yeah.
Did he go or refused to go?
John Robbie went.
John Robbie went. I think Tony Ward refused to go.
Yeah, no, Ollie Campbell went, but I think Tony Ward did refuse to go. Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Fair play to him. Fair play, Tony.
But yeah, it's. I mean, it's South Africa. It's the ultimate tour. I mean, people say New Zealand's the ultimate tour, and it is in a way because New Zealand are the best team in the world. Although not right now, South Africa happen to be. But South Africa Lions tours are defined by tours to South Africa, I think.
Yeah. And they were world champions in 97. They were world champions in 09, and they're world champions in 21.
Yeah. So, I think it's the quintessential Lions tour is a tour to South Africa. So I know there's a certain amount of iconoclasm around Lions tours, but I love the Lions. I love watching them. I think they're magnificent. I think there's something of old rugby that we've managed to keep a hold of in this new sparkling era of, you know, professionalism and franchising and all this kind of stuff that happens in sport. I think Lions tours are, you know, a bit of a throwback, but magnificent because of it. And I love the idea that, you know, you spend 3 years and 11 months cursing the bejesus out of Alan Wynne-Jones or Owen Farrell or whoever. And then for 1 month, you get to cheer them.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the words of Jerusalem.
To throw a contrarian thing in there, you know, I've never been a huge fan of the Lions. I watch the games every time, and yeah, I'm very interested in them. And as a rugby fan, and I totally get the fact that it's a huge honour for the players. I totally get that it's great that all the four nations come together and make one team. And as Dave just said, you can cheer for Owen Farrell or whoever. I love all that about it, but to me, it just doesn't, like, it looks like all these lads going out in red jerseys. They're only short of having the pith helmets, and you know, they're going out to the colonies to shoot up the bloody locals, and you know, it's
I was there 12 years ago, and there was loads of lads wearing those hats.
It gets
loads of them.
It gets hairs on the back of my neck going up for the wrong reason. Like
they are actually very effective as headwear. There's a reason why they wore them.
There was also loads of fellas dressed as leeks and as leprechauns and with kilts, and it's a great festival of rugby. It's like a World Cup. Everyone is supporting the one team. It actually is great fun.
I'm not absolutely knocking it. I'm just saying it gets the hackles on the back of my neck up for the wrong reasons. And, you know, I'm old enough to remember South Africa in 1980, and the people who went and the people who didn't go. And I'm not demonizing either one of them, but we had they shouldn't have gone previous to that. So by 1980, I had no respect for anybody who went at the time. As a teenager in 1980, I had no time for those guys going down there. And the other aspect of it back then that rankled with me was the whole British Lions, because it was called the British Lions back then. It was only very recently, it was 89, was it, that they threw the and Irish in there, and still it hasn't reached Wales to this day.
It has not.
It hasn't got there.
John, in fairness, the Telegraph hasn't reached Wales. I agree with you.
Robin McBride
just to throw it
even said it.
Stark kind of a contrast. This is probably the most transformed Springbok team.
Yeah, and that's great. Look, having come through the era of apartheid and been anti-apartheid and been on all of those marches and done all that back in the 80s, I still get kind of goosebumps when I see black, white, and coloured, as they used to be called back in the day.
Yes, we point out that John is using the South African terms, not the.
Of course, standing on a field, listening to an anthem that encompasses both traditions. Like it really, it still makes me emotional to watch that. Maybe I'm a bit of an old whatever, but
if you were a pilot,
certainly an old something anyway.
Sorry, Jason, what'd you say?
Oh, I just said if you were a pilot, you would fly that 747 over Ellis Park.
I would for sure.
Like, no, I mean, I agree with John, because I mean, not unlike John, I was on those marches, and had my Free Nelson Mandela specials, 7-inch, and all this kind of stuff, special AKA to be precise. And
I voted for him to be a member of our students' union in college.
But to see him in '95, it was an amazing moment. I mean, I don't know if people who didn't live through that or didn't live through that era. I mean, because we didn't live through apartheid. I mean, let's be honest, we didn't. I mean, we lived through the era. We should have some precision. But for anyone who lived through that era and kind of gave a shit about human beings, to see Nelson Mandela at the head of the South African team was just an extraordinary moment. A moment that made you believe that things actually, that sometimes things can change and things will change. And now you see South Africa and Siya Kolisi's the captain. And it's the most transformed team I've ever seen. And it's and then the Lions are going there and we're taking them on in what is always the most iconic of tours. I mean, the 97 tour, possibly because it was the first time that they allowed cameras backstage, that tour film, Living with the Lions, is the great sports documentary. Certainly for me, I think it's the best sports documentary ever. And I still remember like the word Jim Talbot speeches and stuff like that.
Yeah, if only we had a blood, sweat, and beers is better, he says.
Oh yeah. Well, okay. I was trying to be humble there, Jay.
If only we had a Nelson Mandela figure in the north of Ireland currently, or anywhere in Ireland that could bring everybody into the fold in Northern Ireland. But hold on, this is a rugby podcast. Let's.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the guys.
Let's leave the politics.
This broad generalization alert. Unfortunately, the guys in Northern Ireland whose first name is Nelson tend not to be the unifying kind.
That's what we need, though. We need to put our arms around our northern brothers and welcome them into in about 10 years. In about 10 years, we need to do it. Sorry, lads. We've gone all political.
Anyway, lads, can we get back? Can we leave the lines there and just have a quick look at our match against Connacht in the Rainbow Cup? A tenuous South African
connection.
They are playing in the Rainbow Cup.
Well, all I can say is the season is over. We lost the game last weekend. We've got this stupid poxy Rainbow Cup thing that doesn't even have the South African teams in it, playing against us. So we've already played the Pro 14 final. I find it difficult to get enthusiasm about the game against Connacht for the weekend.
A chance of revenge, John. Revenge.
It's interesting you should say that, but the two teams have been announced for the Ulster-Munster match, and they're actually not far off both full strengths. Okay, like there's a couple of guys rotated in on the Ulster side. I mean, but understandably, they are very disappointed after their season came to an abrupt halt against Leicester last weekend. But they are playing, their first strength or their opening batsmen. They're two starters in the second row, like a pretty strong back row. They've got Lowry in an out half, Matson in a scrum half. They have McCluskey and Addison in the centre, which I think would be interesting to see Addison there. Stockdale's at full back. So they are kind of, Munster certainly gone full board. They've got, Kilcoyne's playing Ryan.
That's their big victory.
Yeah. Byrne is playing their line. O'Mahony, Coombs, Murray's playing. JJ's at out half. Scannell and Goggin in the centre. Conway's on the wing. Mike Haley.
And the guys who aren't starting are on the bench, like Ende, so they've got.
Yeah, so like they've even one guy I am looking forward to is Salanoa. I mean, I know he left on bad terms from here, but he's played very little for Munster in the past year. But I am interested to see how he's progressing, just to see if he's coming on, because progressing, yeah, exactly. Because I don't know, He seems to be a bit of he gets injured in warm-ups. I think there's a couple of lads, unfortunately, in Leinster that happens to as well. But but come back to our game. I honestly can't figure out what they're going to do. Are we going to just all guns back on the horse, or are they going to use it as development? Because Lancaster certainly is hinting at going for it.
I'd say they're probably
fellas staying focused and fit for Ireland tours. Yeah, I mean, like obviously there's going to be lads like Sexton are going to be out, but I'm sure Ryan and Ringrose are fairly high up the Lions replacement list, so they are coming back from pretty long term 2 months injuries. They played a game and a half since they've come back. I'm sure they want to get back up to full fitness pretty soon. Obviously, there's talk of the Ireland tours being canned.
It has been canned.
Yeah, but there's talk of them playing USA and Canada and possibly Japan. In Dublin. Yeah. So, I mean, Japan is here for the Lions and they're playing up in Edinburgh, and I think England are playing Canada and Canada and America. So presumably that's not that difficult for them to jump on a plane from here.
I think those guys, I mean, leaving aside the Lions anyway, I think those guys are going to want to play anyway. There's a lot of guys who are going to want to try and get last weekend out of their system, and the best way to do that is to play rugby. Of course, that won't be possible for all of them. Some of them will have to be rested. Some of them probably nursing knocks and stuff. So I'd say you'd see a blend of guys. You'll see guys like Frawley might start. Some of the guys on the bench will start. I'd say, like I said,
what I'd like to see, who does need an operation, has their operation, and uses this time that they have, that regardless of whether there's Lions tours to come ahead, an Ireland match in Dublin, or the remainder of the Rainbow Cup, that anyone does have it, has their operations, and instead of waiting, as normally happens, for 2 months after the season finishes, in case they do need to go on a tour, and then they end up having an operation in August when they should be doing their pre-season and getting ready for the new season, and then they don't come back until October, November. I wish people just get their operations done now. That's my wish. If I had a chicken and a wishbone, that's what I would do.
That's fair enough, Jason. Unfortunately, if they have any chance of a Lions tour, they're going to
Yeah,
disregard
no, those
their
lads
voice.
do. But I'm more sort of talking about the kind of the squad players. I guess the draw of a young flag wanting to go on Lions tour. I totally get that. But I mean, I have to say, I'm glad that say Levy took his chance and said, right, I got a few games back in. I have a bit of a cleanup operation needed, and I'm not going to wait till the summer. I'm going to get it done now, and then I'll be raring to go come September. You know,
I can't believe Michael Bent didn't make the Lions tour.
Seeing as our other tight heads did.
Yeah, I think what's he done wrong? No, I agree with Jason. I think that there's guys who will need cleanup operations and that kind of thing. Have them now. Have a nice long pre-season, and then they can be ready to be injured for Leinster.
So do we now see the reason why we signed Michael Alatoa?
Oh, I always saw that reason.
Because both of our starting tight heads have gone on a Lions tour and won't be seen again till a week before the autumn internationals.
Especially with Michael Bent retiring.
yeah, but like he was just like for like with Benty gone.
Yeah, that's what he is. And
Starting tight head for the Southern Hemisphere champions.
yeah,
he's an upgrade from Michael Bent, let's say, but still, that's what he's probably doubling his salary by coming
and
to.
there'd also be pressure on him. There could also be pressure on him, internal pressure on his position in New Zealand, because New Zealand do operate, although they don't talk about it as much as they used to, they still operate that protected player system. So for all you know, there could be the All Blacks under 20s tight head prop could be behind them, which means.
Actually, isn't there an Irish guy behind Oliver Diego?
Ali Jaeger,
Yeah. Mixed now.
Actually, did you see Jack Regan has signed for the
I did, yeah. I don't think he's going to get too much hurling in there.
He's
it's a good move for him.
Oh, it is, yeah.
I mean, he's inching back towards Ireland. You know what I mean? Like, he's played Super Rugby. He's getting. Like, I mean, like you look at Byrne. Byrne was, delivering pizzas, and he took his chance, went over to Wales, and I don't know, maybe say 6 years later, he's gone on a Lions tour.
Yeah, and look at the provenance of the chap. Obviously, he's got athletic blood running through his veins in a different code. But he was sub academy in Leinster, I believe, and then did 3 years in the Ulster Academy. Didn't get kept on. Maybe a little bit like, as you say, Tyke Byrne didn't get kept on after 4 years in the Leinster Academy. So this is a chance to make good in the Northern Hemisphere, and under Mike Ruddock, we're better.
Yeah, there are many paths to the top.
Yeah, he's a big lad too. He's 6'6" and built.
I know.
So who knows? Who knows what this could lead to?
Are we starting the Jack Regan back to Leinster bandwagon, seeing as we all grievously missed the Tyke Byrne one?
Absolutely. Jack Regan for president.
Get in there.
Remember, you heard it here first, lads.
Yeah. Anyway, boys, as ever, thanks a million. Thanks a million for watching. If you are following us Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, please give us a like, subscription, and thumbs up. Thanks again. Cheers.